Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. My name is Qureshi, and I am here today to discuss the management history. So let us go to the slides. Management history. In management history, we are going to discuss from the scientific management, and then we will be discussing the approaches that include qualitative approach, organizational behavior, and contingency approach. So, starting from the scientific management, let us discuss that what is scientific management. Management of a business, industry, or economy according to the principles of efficiency derived from experiments in methods of work and production, especially from time and motion studies. So, the concept from the time and motion studies that include the line management from the previous lecture, you know that the example of the packing and assembling of mobile parts that the production line do, the line managers do. There's the tailors scientific principles were implemented in many factories, often increasing productivity by a factor of three or more. These principles are based on time and motion studies. टाइम एंड मोशन स्टडीज बेसिकली जिस तरह हमने ये बात की थी लास्ट टाइम कि जो फर्स्ट लाइन मैनेजर्स थे या जो लाइन मैनेजर्स थे वो क्या करते हैं कि सारे एक लाइन में खड़े हो जाते हैं और मोबाइल के हम मोबाइल की तरफ लेते हैं और मोबाइल के डिफरेंट पार्ट्स को वो असेंबल करते हैं अब उनका टाइम अब वो जो पट्टी चलती जा रही होती है उस पर उन्होंने किस तरह किस मोशन में और कितनी स्पीड में वो पार्ट एक दूसरे पे असेंबल करके दोबारा लाइन पे रखने हैं फिर वो लाइन आगे मूव कर जाती है दैट इज व्हाट द टाइम एंड मैनेजमेंट कंसेप्ट वाज द बेसिक rule of the scientific management is the time and management and the drawback of this is that mismanagement of time cause a product defective. अगर आपका टाइम एंड मोशन में इतनी सिंक्रोनाइजेशन नहीं है तो आपका जो प्रोडक्ट है वो डिफेक्टिव हो जाएगा क्योंकि वो लाइन से आउट हो जाएगा और इस तरह आपका एक प्रोडक्ट वेस्ट हो जाएगा नेक्स्ट कम्स अबाउट the Kaizen technique. Kaizen technique is basically a Japanese technique, and Kai means change, and Z means good. So Kaizen means continuous improvement. जिस तरह इसको हम लोग अगर रिलेट करें तो हदीस का मफहूम भी ये है कि मोमिन दो बार एक सुराख से नहीं डसा जाता तबाह हो गया वो शख्स जिसका आज उसके कल से बेहतर नहीं है तो ये कॉन्सेप्ट था जो कॉन्टिन्यूस इम्प्रूवमेंट का था जिसमें टोटल क्वालिटी मैनेजमेंट की बात की जाए तो टोटल क्वालिटी मैनेजमेंट उसने दो बातें भी यही कही थी नेवर रिपीट मिस्टेक नंबर टू टेक वन स्टेप डेली टुवर्ड्स द betterment. Kaizen is a strategy where employees at all levels of company work together proactively to achieve regular incremental improvements to the manufacturing process. In a sense, it combines a collective talent within a company to create a powerful engine for improvement. तो ये कुछ मेथड्स जो टाइम एंड मैनेजमेंट और इम्प्रूवमेंट के हवाले से साइंटिफिक मैनेजमेंट के अंदर रिलाई करते थे So, coming towards our next approach, the quantitative approach to management. So, first we will discuss about what does the quantitative mean. Quantitative approach to management involves the use of quantitative techniques such as statics, information models, and computer simulations to improve decision making. Quantitative data uses measurable data to formulate facts and uncover patterns in research. Quantitative data collection methods are much more structured than quantitative data collection methods. Quantitative data collection methods include various forms of surveys: online survey, paper survey, face-to-face interviews, online polls, and systematic observations. So, the basic concept of the quantitative approach is based on the numerical data. For further concept, we will see a video that will make you more clear about this topic. So, please have a look on this video. That is about the quantitative approach to management.
The quantitative approach to management incorporates many analytical and numeric techniques into management methods. The goal is to have specific formulas that information can be plugged into to provide the best answer to common management questions. In this lesson, Joe will give examples of quantitative techniques in action. Joe is a factory manager who wants to be more analytical in his review of operations. There are three main areas generally considered part of quantitative management. First is management science, also called operations research. This area applies mathematical models and statistical techniques to management decision making. Some examples of management science include determining the critical path in a production line. This is the set of steps where any delays will lead to delays in the entire production process. Determining the percentage of items produced that have quality errors and the types of errors that are present. Joe will implement management science in his operations review process by applying statistical concepts like error percentage into his quality measurement process. He'll ask that each item produced be examined and any defects noted. Then he'll have a staffer produce a statistical review of the percentage of problems and of the likelihood of different problems occurring. Once he knows the common issues, he'll be able to revisit production methods and, hopefully, reduce their occurrence. The next main area is operations management, which applies management science methods to improve the timing of delivery and streamline production processes. Some examples of operations research include forecasting inventory and raw material needs for future periods, determining the best location for a distribution center to minimize shipping times to all potential purchasers. Joe will implement operations management in his new operations review process by reviewing inventory forecasting methods to see if the amount of materials sitting in the warehouse can be reduced without impacting the production process. This will reduce the amount of money tied up in inventory, improving his operating results, and hopefully his bonus. Finally, we have management information systems, which are computer-based systems that generate information useful in managing a business from raw data. Some examples of management information systems include reports giving trends in sales data and showing seasonal variations, reports showing production defect rates and comparing them to prior periods. Joe will implement management information systems into his operations review process by setting up a spreadsheet that tracks some key information impacting his team. He needs sales projections, so he knows how many units the factory needs to produce each month to meet demand. In addition, he'll want reports showing the trends in defect rates, so he can see if his quality improvement methods are successful. In summary, the quantitative approach to management applies numeric methods such as formulas, statistics, and scheduling models to management problems and uses the results to monitor and improve management decisions.
So I hope you have got an idea about the quantitative approach. And hello, now moving towards the qualitative approach. Qualitative approach is primarily exploratory research. It is used to gain an understanding of underlying reasons, opinions, motivations. It provides insights into the problem and help to develop ideas or hypotheses for potential qualitative research. Qualitative data collection methods vary using unstructured or semi-structured techniques. Some uncommon methods include focus group discussions, individual interviews, observations. The sample size is typically small and respondents are selected to fulfill a given quota. So that was an extra um, with the quantitative analysis. So you should have look on the qualitative analysis too. I'm sharing a video about qualitative research. It will help to understand more easily.
Imagine that your town has implemented a gun buyback program. The city offers to buy used guns from people, even if those guns are illegal. There are no questions asked. The city hopes that this program will reduce the number of guns on the streets and the amount of gun violence. You're skeptical that the program will work. How could you figure out whether it does or not? There are two types of research that you could do to figure out whether the gun buyback program actually works to reduce violence. Qualitative research involves looking in depth at non-numerical data. Think of the word quality when you think of qualitative data. You are taking a deep, qualitative look at a phenomenon. Compare qualitative research to quantitative research, which looks at patterns in numeric data. For example, if you want to study whether a gun buyback program helps reduce gun violence, you could look at crime rates before and after the program was implemented. That would be quantitative research. But you could also talk to people who have been convicted of a violent crime involving gun violence and ask them questions about why the program didn't work for them and what conditions they think it could work for. This is qualitative research. Let's look closer at where researchers get their data for qualitative research. One way that psychologists get qualitative data is through examining artifacts and pre-existing data like archival records. Archival records are historical records. A quantitative example of archival records is the crime rates that we looked at when we were taking a quantitative approach to whether the gun buyback program works or not. Archival records can be qualitative too. For example, what if you had access to court documents, including transcripts of court cases in which the defendant is accused of gun violence? You could read through those transcripts and look for clues as to why they chose guns and what methods would work and would not work to prevent them from participating in gun violence. Archival records can sometimes overlap with artifacts, which are cultural objects that give researchers insight into a culture. For example, the diary of a man who used to have several illegal guns but sold them through the buyback program could give you valuable insight into why it worked for him. His diary is an example of both an artifact and an archival record. On the other hand, the two do not always overlap. You might decide to look at a popular video game, which depicts graphic gun violence, that was designed by someone in your town. You could look at the game before the buyback program, and then the new version released after the buyback program to see if it changed. The video game is an artifact, but not an archival record. Artifacts and archival records are just two examples of sources for qualitative research. Observations are another key source for many researchers. There are many types of observation. One type of observation that is sometimes used in qualitative research is participant observation, which occurs when a researcher interacts or participates in the very situation that they are observing. Sometimes this is done with the subject's knowledge, and sometimes it is done covertly. For example, let's say that you decide to see if selling a gun as a buyback program will actually reduce the likelihood that the person will commit a crime. So when someone sells a gun at the program, you introduce yourself and ask if you can follow him around and observe him for your research. He agrees, and so you shadow him to see if he ends up committing a crime. You stay at his house and eat at his dining room table. Since the guy knows that you're observing him, you are doing overt observation. And because you are becoming part of his inner circle of friends, you are participating in the process. So you are doing overt participant observation. Overt observation is good because it is very strong ethically. Since the person knows he's being observed and can say that he doesn't want to be part of your research, there are no major ethical concerns. But overt observation can be tricky because people may change their behaviors. For example, maybe the guy would have committed a crime, but because you're there, he doesn't. Because of the risk that people may change their behaviors, or in order to study a group that is hard to study from the outside, some researchers choose to do covert participant observation, which is when a participant observer does not disclose that he or she is observing. For example, what if you wanted to know how gangs feel about the program? They might not talk to outsiders, so you could join the gang and hang out with them to observe their behaviors and hear their thoughts. This is exactly what the famous psychologist Leon Festinger did in the mid-20th century when he joined a religious cult to see how they thought. Though there are always ethical issues associated with covert observation, sometimes there is no other way to get an accurate view of people's behaviors. Had Festinger not joined the cult, he would not have gotten a good view of how they operated. Observation is a good way to see how people act, but sometimes nothing works better than simply asking people for their thoughts and feelings. Interviews are a key source of data for qualitative research. Remember that you want to talk to people who are convicted of crimes involving gun violence. Asking questions and recording answers constitutes an interview. You could interview several criminals and then sort through their answers to see if they have anything in common. Another popular form of interviews is focus groups, or an interview on a specific subject with a small group of people. For example, perhaps you get several people who participated in the gun buyback program. You put them together around a table and ask questions about the gun buyback program. You listen and record their answers, which becomes your qualitative data. Qualitative research involves looking in depth at non-numerical data. There are several sources of qualitative data, including archival records, artifacts, participant observation, which can be either covert or overt, interviews, and focus groups.
Okay, so I hope you have got a clear idea about the quantitative approach and qualitative approach. So let me repeat it again. The quantitative approach is the collection method include various forms of surveys, online survey, paper survey, face-to-face survey, systematic observation, and that involves the use of quantitative techniques such as statistics, information models, and computer simulations to improve decision making. And in qualitative approach, that is primarily exploratory research. It is used to gain an understanding of underlying reasons, opinions, motivations. It provides insights into the problem or helps to develop ideas or hypotheses for potential qualitative research. Qualitative data collection methods vary using unstructured or semi-structured technique considered of focus groups as discussed in that video, group discussion, individual interviews, and observations. So this was a small about these two approaches. Now coming towards the understanding organizational behavior. So what is the organizational behavior? The organizational behavior is the study of the way people interact within groups. Normally, this study is applied in an attempt to create more efficient business organization. Again, we will go for a video. You will learn more about that. So turning over to the video.
Why do people behave a certain way in an organizational environment? What factors affect job performance, employee interaction, job commitment, leadership, and managerial styles? Individuals have studied this very topic for decades in order to find ways of increasing organizational performance. Organizational behavior is the study of both group and individual performance and activity within an organization. This area of study examines human behavior in a work environment and determines its impact on job structure, performance, communication, motivation, leadership, etc. Internal and external perspectives are two theories of how organizational behavior can be viewed by companies. Let's take a look at how the perspectives are different through examining Ninja Corporation. The Ninja Corporation has two human resource managers at their headquarters. Julia and Nick have different opinions regarding how to use organizational behavioral factors to improve work conditions. Julia embraces the internal perspective and believes that employees' behavior is in a large part based on their own personal feelings, interactions, thoughts, and experiences. This theory revolves around the idea that in order to understand individuals in an organizational environment, an individual must understand the person's thoughts, feelings, and personal values. Recently, a manager mentioned to Julia that she was having difficulty with motivating one of her subordinates in the sales division. Julia met with the manager and employee to see what advice she could offer in this situation. Julia spoke with the subordinate, who revealed that he wanted to achieve his sales goals and felt that his coworkers were getting the best territories and extra feedback. Once Julia was able to uncover the subordinate's internal employment issues, she then could explain what motivational techniques would improve his performance to the manager. Her human resource coworker Nick had the opposite view of organizational behavior. Nick was also a human resource manager at Ninja Corporation. He took an external perspective of organizational behavior. He believed that external events and environmental factors affected an individual's job performance and behavior. A recent example of this theory would be when Nick told numerous managers to increase their subordinates' salaries by $5,000 in order to further motivate the sales team. Organizational behavior's history is really a combination of numerous fields of study. The Industrial Revolution brought about the need for understanding human behavior in a work environment. The first mention of analyzing work was with Frederick Winslow Taylor, 1856 to 1915. He viewed job tasks as a bunch of components that could be analyzed and broken down into small parts. Taylor believed you could substitute or replace individuals at any point in the labor process, as you could with parts on a machine. The second part of organizational behavior was the human relations movement. Although productivity increased during the Industrial Revolution, there was also a breaking point where workers started to become dissatisfied and unmotivated. This led to an interest in developing individual employees' human motivation. The Western Electric Hawthorne Work Studies, 1923 to 1933, uncovered how workers supported each other when a work group felt that management was trying to exploit their productivity. The studies also showed how rewards and punishments could influence worker accomplishment. The continued growth of organizational behavior grew out of numerous other influences from the fields of psychology, sociology, anthropology, engineering, and management. Organizational behavior is the study of both group and individual performance and activity within an organization. Internal and external perspectives are two. The internal perspective states that employees' behavior is in a large part based on their own personal feelings, interactions, thoughts, and experiences. The external perspective of organizational behavior is concerned with the idea that external events and environmental factors affected an individual's job performance and behavior. The history of organizational behavior was influenced by numerous disciplines, the Industrial Revolution, and the human relations movement.
Okay, so We will share about the details on internal environment and external environment of the organization in our next lecture that totally consists on the organizational culture and environment. So let me revise these concepts of the organizational behavior that is totally based on the norms and cultures people practicing in an organization. I hope you have got an idea about that. This is of the organization environment, and these are the inputs transformation process, and these are the outputs, and this is totally based on the these are the factors which are implementing on the organizations, and this will be detailed discussed in the next chapter. So now comes towards or the last topic of this chapter, the contingency approach. Contingency approach is also known as situational approach, and the concept situational approach is a concept in management stating that there is no universally applicable set of management principles by which to manage organizations. You can say that if plan A doesn't work, then you should go for plan B. On this spot, there is no prior planning done for this approach. This is on the spot decision making, and organizations are individually different, face different situations, and require different ways of managing. So we will have to look on the other video, you will get an idea about the contingency approach. This video is about the contingency approach of management. Please have a look on it.
A contingency approach to management is based on the theory that management effectiveness is contingent or dependent upon the interplay between the application of management behaviors and specific situations. In other words, the way you manage should change depending on the circumstances. One size does not fit all. The contingency approach to management finds its foundation in the contingency theory of leadership effectiveness, developed by management psychologist Fred Fielder. The theory states that leadership effectiveness, as it relates to group effectiveness, is a component of two factors: task motivation, or relation motivation and circumstances. You measure task motivation or relation motivation by the least preferred coworker (LPC) scale. The LPC scale asks the manager to think of the person they least like working with and then rate that person on a set of questions, each involving an 8-point scale. For example, a score of 1 would be uncooperative, and a score of 8 would be cooperative. Fielder believed that people with a higher LPC score try to maintain harmony in their work relationships, while people with a lower LPC score are motivated to focus on task accomplishment. The theory states that task or relations motivations is contingent upon whether the manager is able to both control and affect the group's situational favorability or outcome. According to the theory, you can assess situational favorability by 3 factors. Leader-member relations. This factor addresses the manager's perception of his cooperative relations with his subordinates. In other words, is the cooperation between you and your employees good or bad? Task structure. This factor relates to whether the structure of the work task is highly structured, subject to standard procedures, and subject to adequate measures of assessment. Certain tasks are easy to structure, standardize, and assess, such as the operation of an assembly line. Position power. This factor asks if the manager's level of authority is based on punishing or rewarding behavior. For example, does the manager derive his authority from providing bonuses for meeting sales goals, or terminating employees for failure to meet the goals? The combination of leader-member relations, task structure, and position power create different situations that have been coined octants 1 through 8. You can divide these 8 situations into 3 broad categories: favorable situations, intermediate situations, and unfavorable situations. According to the theory, each situation is handled the best by either high or low LPC managers. The theory argues that high LPC managers are most effective at influencing employee group behavior in intermediate situations, while low LPC managers are most effective in favorable or unfavorable situations. The concept is far simpler than it appears. Let's use an example to clarify it. Let's say you are hired as an outside consultant for a motorcycle company to assess management effectiveness. You decide to use the contingency management approach to assess and advise the company. You begin by testing each member of the management team to determine his or her LPC score. You then determine the type of situations that exist at the company and determine that most of the situations are either unfavorable or favorable situations. You advise the company to train its management to facilitate managers with low LPC scores, since they are best suited for managing most of the situations at the company. This makes sense at a factory because a low LPC motivated person is motivated to focus on task completion, which is very important in production tasks. You have matched the management type most effective for dealing with the situation. The contingency approach to management is grounded in Fielder's contingency theory of leadership effectiveness. The theory argues that a manager's effectiveness is based upon the interplay of task or relation motivation and the circumstance. In other words, certain circumstances require different management approaches with a focus either on motivating for task completion or maintaining harmonious group relations. You can determine whether a situation is favorable, intermediate, or unfavorable based upon the level and combination of leader-member relations, task structure, and position power. Managers with high LPC scores are best at managing employees in intermediate situations, while managers with low LPC scores are best at managing employees in favorable or unfavorable situations.
So, I hope you have got an idea about the contingency approach that was totally surrounded by the situational approach, and your manager need to take decision on the situation-based scenarios. So, this was all about the management history, and we have discussed the scientific management, approach, qualitative approach, and contingency approach. So this was about the this chapter, and inshallah, the next we will be discussing in detail is organizational culture and environment, and the factors discussed in this chapter were the internal environment, external environment, and these will be highlighted in the next lecture of chapter number 3. So, see you soon in the next chapter. And if you have any questions, please comment below the comment box. Thank you very much.